Norse in Wonderland, where nothing's as it seems. Norse in Wonderland, the truth will haunt your dreams. Norse in Wonderland, where nothing's as it seems. Norse in Wonderland, the truth will haunt your dreams.
Welcome back to Norse in Wonderland, where history isn't what it seems, and kings look a little less holy when you pull back the veil. Today's side quest, oh, there goes my light, dives into the man behind the King James Bible, a text millions still revere as divinely inspired. But what happens when you realize that the man who authorized it also wrote a manual for hunting wise women? Let's talk about the Bible, the witches, and the king whose thirst for control rewrote both. Nothing says divine inspiration like a committee of men rewriting scripture because the king didn't like the footnotes. King James gave us the most poetic Bible in English and the creepiest how-to guide on torturing your neighborhood herbalist. Imagine working on the Psalms in the morning and finishing your witch hunting book at night. That's what I call multitasking. In 1604, King James I commissioned what would become the King James Bible, published in 1611. For many Christians, it's the most beautiful and sacred English translation ever created. But James didn't authorize this project because he was a lover of poetry or a humble servant of God. The Geneva Bible was already widely used by Protestants, and it was deeply popular with the people. But there was a problem. Its margin notes. Those notes challenged the absolute power of kings, suggested resistance to tyrants was godly, and gave readers too much authority to interpret scripture for themselves. In other words, it was dangerous to monarchy. The King James Version was James' solution. Strip out the rebellious notes, unify scripture under his authority, and create a version of the Bible that tied obedience to God with obedience to the king. The Bible wasn't just a religious text anymore. It was a tool of political consolidation. James had another obsession, witches. He believed they were real, everywhere, and plotting against him personally. Could you blame them? In 1597, before he was even King of England, he wrote Daemonologie. This book wasn't just folklore. It was a legal and theological justification for hunting, torturing, and executing accused witches. He had already been involved in the North Berwick witch trials in Scotland, where women were accused of raising storms to try to sink his ship. His paranoia turned into policy, and his book gave judges and clergy a playbook for rooting out so-called witches. The real threat to James wasn't old crones casting curses. It was the wise women, the healers, herbalists, and midwives who carried generational knowledge outside of royal or church authority. They represented independence, especially female independence, and that was intolerable, much like me. By branding them as witches, James justified destroying their communities, silencing their wisdom, and replacing grassroots knowledge with state and church-sanctioned control. The same king who put his stamp on the Bible also put his stamp on the persecution of women who lived outside his system. And yet here we are, continuing to come back, stand up, and say, F this. I love it. So here's the contradiction. King James is remembered as the man behind the most enduring English Bible, yet he was also the man who fueled one of the darkest chapters of witch persecution. Both projects come from the same root: a thirst for power, a paranoia about threats, and a determination to make sure truth flowed only through him. The King James Bible unified scripture by stripping away dissent. Daemonologie unified law by stripping away women's independence. Together, they showed us that his legacy wasn't holy, it was strategic. If the King James Bible was created to secure royal power, how much of modern Christianity rests on a foundation of propaganda? What wisdom was erased when wise women were branded as witches and silenced under James' authority? Can a text like the King James Bible be separated from the motives of the man who commissioned it? Today's affirmation: I carry the wisdom that cannot be burned, silenced, or rewritten. My truth is older than kings, older than fear, and it walks with me still. King James left behind scripture that shaped a religion and a manual that fueled persecution. Both served his throne. And as always, if anything happens to me, it's more than a convenient accident, and I didn't do it myself. I'm happy, healthy, and cautious.
Chasing the rabbit, down we must go. Where does it end? Nobody knows. Hurry up now, we're running out of time. You better keep up or get left behind. Norse in Wonderland, when